should pop up and say you're being recorded.
Yes, I see it up in the corner. Yes.
Okay, so I have your permission to record?
Yes.
Okay, on the Skype call right now, I like saying on the phone, is Shawn McBride. We've done an interview before, it was a couple months ago. Shawn McBride, and please correct me if I'm getting any of this wrong, is one of the very few people in all of America that's able to practice in, I think, 1/5. You have the ability to practice in 12 states, and you pass the California bar.
13,
is that right?
13 states in D.C., and one of the states is California, yes, and I'm California licensed, yes, California bar. Yes.
He can practice in Washington, D.C. He can practice in California. He can practice in easily a fourth of America.
Yes.
So you have some understanding of the law at the federal level, the California level, and how other states see it. Is that fair?
Yes. Taken and passed 8 bar exams. They always test state law plus the federal constitution is usually part of it. There's usually questions on all of that in there. So.
Okay. And I remember our last interview was talking about, you wrote an article talking about how California creates a law and that it may affect federal law in other states and what role. And then we kind of evolved into a conversation about how much independence legally does California have to kind of do its own things, say what it wants, create groundbreaking laws, say, yeah, maybe America did it this way, and maybe a bunch of states agreed to that and had legal infrastructure, and maybe the federal government said that, but I'm big California, and I decide the law says X, and I have some of the smartest lawyers on earth, and a ton of them, some of the best universities, to come up with some of the smartest legal reasoning you've never seen before. Is that okay?
That's right. Okay. I mean, there's an interplay between the states, and I think probably today we'll get some into our conversation, I'm sure, about the state and federal interplay. But the general concept is you have state law and federal law. They are interconnected but independent governments, and federal law, to the extent that it's valid, controls throughout the country. But then you have the 10th Amendment that says whatever is not controlled by the federal government is delegated to the states. And then so the states get to have their own state constitution, their own state laws and rules. And so that's kind of your general setup of how it all starts. And then there's interplay between the two systems as far as how far can one go. You can't violate the federal rights. Federal government can only come into the states so far. So there's kind of this interplay and tension. And then what we talked about last time, we started with California's new independent contractor law and really how the states look to each other, right? So if you read any state law cases, what you'll see is if you don't have rulings directly on point already in your state, the lawyers will usually go look at another state and say, hey, let's look at what they did over there at a sister state. And, can we use that to inform what we should do in our state? So the states have a long history of looking at each other's decisions to kind of give them an idea of where they should go.
So recently I asked if you would be willing to do another interview. And again, I want to apologize to all the viewers. Everybody's adjusting to coronavirus. Yes, I have a better studio, blah, blah, blah. Had to be out in the field today. Please forgive us. But we're going to make sure the information you get is top notch. And that's why I wanted to talk to you, Shawn. So recently, Donald Trump said, hey, I want to reopen the economy.
Yep.
Even though the CDC, World Health experts are saying, don't do that.
Yep.
That's bad. That's not what should be happening. That's not how you save lives.
Sure.
Trump says, hey, I want to reopen the economy. Well, I got to tell you, in California, that made people scared, real scared.
Yep.
Like, they're mad at Trump. We hate Trump out here, but that made them scared. So it went from hate to terror, which is not a good escalation. And immediately you started seeing some interesting things that I wanted to kick back to you. So there was a professor of sociology, former president of the California Sociological Association, professor at the University of California system, who last week said, if Trump declares the economy's open, I think California acting like a nation's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. But for a matter of public safety and to save lives, Governor Newsom will have to basically push back against the federal government and say, well, no, you don't get to do that. I'm going to take certain powers to protect my people. That may sound radical, but Also this week, Dr. Srinivasan, who won the MIT and Wall Street Journal Awards for innovation and is a tech millionaire, also suggested a similar thing. We also have two different doctors, medical doctors here in California, who just 2 weeks ago also suggested the same thing. So my question to you, Shawn, is can Trump just reopen the economy? And if he does something so reckless, does the California government have the right to say, whoa, people are going to be dead? And so we're going to do extraordinary, unseen, never before imagined powers.
Yep.
And we're going to do it. And we're going to do it right now. And nobody's going to have a problem with that. Shawn, please walk us through the legal understanding, because I'm getting mixed messages on Trump can't do that. Yes, he can do that. Newsom can't do that. Yeah, he could. What can't do? What's going on here?
You got a couple things at play here. So, obviously, Trump, being a president of the U.S., is largely in charge of the federal government, right? So, shares power with Congress to create laws, but from an executive standpoint, there's a lot of power of we're going to enforce that, we're not going to enforce that, we're going to direct this, we're going to direct that. So a lot of the shutdown efforts, and interestingly, he hasn't really played heavily on the federal card with the shutdowns. And I think that part of that is there are constitutional questions on that, right? So he's put guidelines out, he's recommended shutdowns, and he's let the shutdowns largely happen at the state level. And there's even been a lot of pushback in the last week or two about why don't you do a federal shutdown? And he keeps saying, I'm sending it to the states. And I think part of the reason why he's doing that is because he knows he doesn't have full federal power to do the shutdowns. Because of the Constitution allowing people to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. There's some clauses in there that recommend people can travel. So the concept being, does he have the power to shut things down? He has the power to regulate interstate commerce. That is something that's given to the federal government. It's interstate commerce, and there's been a long line of Supreme Court cases on the ability of the federal government to regulate interstate commerce. That would be probably where federal regulation would come in if they were going to try to force things to be open, is they would say to the extent that it's interstate commerce, tractor trailers going down the highway, coming in and out of California to move goods, probably within the federal government's power. There's a line of cases actually where, they were regulating trains coming in and out of states, the length of a train, for instance. There's Supreme Court cases on 18-wheelers, and, to the extent the states can put safety requirements on the 18-wheelers. And basically, if you look at that line of cases, the general gist is if people are moving in interstate commerce, the states really can't unreasonably impede that, right? So if somebody's trying to get goods from California to Georgia and the federal government says it's okay to move those goods from California to Georgia, they're going, right, under a federal mandate. So to some extent, that part of a shutdown would be difficult if the full federal government said, hey, we want it open, right? The states are going to have to allow interstate commerce. And even when you get into some of the civil rights cases, they ruled that, buying at a local restaurant, and I think it was Alabama was that case, buying at a local restaurant in Alabama, they couldn't discriminate based on race. And the Supreme Court said, we're going to consider that interstate commerce because that local restaurant in Alabama is buying its goods and supplies in the market. It's interstate commerce, right? And there they use the interstate commerce clause, obviously, to get what most people would consider to be a desirable result, right? To say that you can't discriminate on people based on race, right? And they said because these local restaurants are connected into the